Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Choi Ji-hee and Chung Ye-in. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. We are going to be talking about the ongoing conflict between the medical community and the government. It has been exactly 1 week now since the trainee doctors from the Big Five hospitals here in Seoul have walked out. This was last Tuesday at 6 a.m. We still have a large number of them not coming back to work. More resignation letters being handed in as well. The South Korean government ordering the junior doctors to end their walkouts and return to work by the end of this week or end of this month. Check that on the 29th. If they do come back by the 29th, no legal actions will take place. Nevertheless, 10,000 medical interns and residents have still submitted their resignation letters, stayed off their job until as of last week. Chi, you're going to start us off with the latest updates with what's going on with the ongoing collective action. What do you have for us?
Right. So the Ministry of Health and Welfare reported on Tuesday that it recently conducted an inspection of 99 major hospitals. And during the inspection, it was found that some 9,909 doctors, which counts for about 80.6% of their medical specialties, had submitted their resignations. Now, however, the hospitals have not accepted them yet, and out of the total number of doctors who submitted them, 8,939, or approximately 72.7%, have officially left their workplaces. And in response to this situation, the government announced on the previous day that it would not hold doctors responsible if they returned to their work by the end of this month. And on the previous day, the government issued a treatment maintenance order to hospitals, which the purpose of the order is to prevent doctors from discontinuing their practice by not renewing their contracts with their hospitals without a valid reason, or abandoning their contracts after completing residency programs at these hospitals. Now, the government claims that there have been no major disruptions in the treatment of seriously ill patients, although some mildly ill patients have experienced difficulties accessing medical care. However, the growing healthcare vacancy in hospitals due to the mass departure of doctors is concerning because following the collective action, new patient admissions at 15 tertiary hospitals have decreased by 24%, and surgeries have reduced by 50%. And the government explained that all of these cases, however, were moderate, which means the condition is somewhere between severe and mild, or just mild patients. Well, on a positive note, Health Vice Minister Bang Min-soo stated that although it's challenging to compile accurate figures because it's not easy to verify doctors' return to work, he conveyed the sentiment that doctors have been returning to work in some of these hospitals.
So the legal aspect of all of this, something that we discussed on our program yesterday with our attorney An Jun-sung, there's a lot of gray areas. Again, one of the things that some of these trainee doctors are looking into, because apparently March is like contract season where they renew contracts. This is because, as you know, graduation happens sometime around February, and then once they're done, they sign contracts come March. And so a lot of the contracts do end in March. And so a lot of them, what they're doing is that they're going to be handing in their resignation letters. And if that legally isn't binding because the hospital has not processed the resignation letter, then they're going to simply go, well, I'm just not going to renew my contract, right? I mean, because then legally, what can you do if you say you're not going to renew your contract? Because even for us as freelancers, we have a year-long contract. And if we say we don't want to renew our contract, then we'll be probably done come whatever it may be, whatever the end of the contract time is. And you can't really legally bind us from doing the job. But is it different with the medical community? And of course, our attorney An Jun-sung yesterday raised the issue of ethics being the other thing. And ethically, they should, but this is not what's happening right now. The collective action that we're seeing amongst the trainee doctors was, of course, amongst the agenda during the cabinet meeting held by Prime Minister Han Duck-soo this morning. There, the Prime Minister said those returned to their post by the 29th again will not be facing any legal consequences. Yang, let's get more on this.
So in light of the collective action taken by the medical community, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo indeed has made quite a compelling appeal. So while urging medical professionals to remember their paramount duty, which is to safeguard people's lives, the government stated its clear stance, which is the expansion of the medical school admission quota is definitely an unavoidable task in order to revitalize essential and regional medical services. Now, as we have discussed, Han said the government will not seek for any penalties on those who decide to return by the 29th, emphasizing the government's commitment to engage in dialogues with the professionals and tackling any shortcomings in the medical reform initiatives. Now, today's remarks during the cabinet meeting by Han actually echoes what President Yoon Suk-yeol said this morning on another occasion, which was, quote, difficult to just justify to engage in collective action against the health and lives of the people, which was then followed by his reiteration that it cannot be subject of negotiation or compromise. Now, in the meantime, this cabinet meeting this morning also addressed other agenda, including education. Now, with the introduction of the Nilbom schools, which will launch nationwide in this upcoming first semester in March, Prime Minister Han dubbed it a comprehensive initiative that improves the shortcomings of the current after-school systems. In this new initiative, where child nurturing will be done by the entirety of local community, the government promised that any child desiring extended care will be accommodated by the state. Now, adding that there will be expanded workforce dedicated to these Nilbom school programs, the government committed to closely monitor and support the initial implementation process, as it is aware there had been some challenges in its preparation. On the environmental front, Han has announced a robust, all-government approach in order to combat the spring surge of ultrafine particles following the president's request for more vigorous and proactive measures to protect public health and daily lives. Lastly, as the 21st National Assembly's term it is now nearing its end with only less than 100 days left. Prime Minister Han touched upon the fact that numerous bills crucial for public welfare, economy, and regulatory reforms are still pending approval. The Prime Minister urged faster enactment of these bills, which underscores the direct impact of these delays on the people.
Let's talk about the government public debate that President Yoon Suk-yeol has been leading since the start of the year. This one happened just yesterday on Monday over at South Chungcheong Province. Discussed livelihood issues there. The South Korean president made an important announcement regarding the future use of land that's currently designated for military purposes. Now, there, Yoon expressed the government's intention to explore options for repurposing the land while ensuring that any decision made are in the best interest, promoting regional economic development. G, let's get the details of the 15th debate held just yesterday.
Sure. So President Yoon spoke at the 15th Public Livelihood Debate at Seosan Air Base, where he announced that the government had decided to lift restrictions on land categorized as military facility protection areas. Now, he assured that the decision was made after considering the land usage demand from local residents and would not compromise national security. Now, the government plans to open up approximately 103 million pyeong, which is equivalent to about 84,100 acres of restricted areas. And this move is linked to the president's administration's efforts to spur the development of a high-tech industrial zone in South Chungcheong and the growth of its mobility and defense industries. And in a separate announcement, the Defense Ministry stated that it would free up to 339 square kilometers, which is about 131 square miles of military facility protection areas for civilian use in the coming days. And this marks the most significant change in military use zoning since 2007. Currently, around 8% of all land in Korea is closed off to civilian use for military purposes. Now, the areas that the Defense Ministry release include 287 square kilometers of land around 7 military facilities. This including Seosan Air Base, 38 square kilometers along the border with North Korea, and a zone in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi, where the land's classification has hindered the establishment of a new elementary school. Now, the president explained that military facility protection zones were first introduced back in the 1970s. However, conditions, of course, have changed greatly since then. Rapid urbanization across the country and technological advancements have brought large changes to the structure of the military and security. And the president, in particular, highlighted the benefits the decision will bring to the South Chungcheong province, where Seosan is located. And he noted that the province has fostered some of the nation's leading industries, such as autos and display panels. And also, the city plans to build a civilian airport in the region as well. With the lifting of military facility protection zones, South Chungcheong province will secure the space and conditions it needs to become the economic center of the Yellow Sea Rim as well. And the government plans to designate a free economic zone in the province to help create synergies between foreign advanced technology firms as well as Korean local firms. Now, Yoon also outlined plans to develop specific areas of the province. The government will transform the national advanced industry complexes in Cheonan and Hongseong into industrial complexes specializing in future mobility means. And they'll also create a defense industry cluster in Donsan by using its existing defense-related infrastructure, such as the headquarters of the 3 military branches, as well as the National Defense University.
Let's move on here. The government announcing on this Tuesday that starting from today, the government recommends working from home for pregnant women and individuals with respiratory conditions when the country experiences prolonged and severe fine dust conditions. This all the more important because come around, I would say, April-ish is when, the fine dust levels really increase here in the country. Yane, let's get the details of this.
Sure. So as we step into March, the Environment Ministry has rolled out what is called Total Response Plan for Spring Fine Dust. Now, this comes as part of the high-density fine dust countermeasures by the government that we usually see during the springtime. And it also intensifies efforts to mitigate the dust levels during the peak season. Of course, I think it might be controversial whether it is between December and March or whether during the springtime. So historically, when we look at March, this is the month that we usually see the highest average of concentration level at 27.7 microgram per cubic meter, that surpassing other winter months from December to February. Now, this year, as we expect more stagnant airflow and higher temperatures influenced by high pressure, fine dust situations are likely to take place more frequently than before. So the government's action plan at this time around includes advising flexible work arrangements for vulnerable groups if the fine dust crisis alert level reaches attention level for more than 2 days or longer. Now, even though initially there were other discussions about more aggressive measures, the current policy or current decision focuses on recommending working from home, flexible working hours, and part-time work. Now, in preparation for the new school term, a thorough inspection of indoor air quality in schools is also scheduled. Additionally, public spaces like subway stations and airports, they will see an increase in wet cleaning to 3 times a day. And roads with high pollution or traffic will have street sweeper vehicles running up to 4 times a day. Now, the number of coal-fired power plants that suspends its operation during such period will increase from 15 to 28 units, reflecting the decrease in heating demand as the winter warms. As the farming season begins, agricultural wastes will be collected more frequently in order to prevent illegal burning of such waste, and agricultural residues shredding support teams will also also be operated. The government is also doubling down on enforcing regulations with heightened checks on the implementation of emission reduction targets by major pollutant-emitting businesses, stricter controls on illegal emissions, as well as increased inspections on diesel vehicles and buses for emission levels and idling.
You know, it is true. It's from December to March when the fine dust level is high. It's because of all the heating that's going on, and there's a lot of heating that comes in from a lot of burning of coals that come in from China as well, and as well as South Korea. The reason why I think I said April is because that's when I have respiratory illness problems because of hay fever. That's when the flower starts spreading out pollen everywhere, and hay fever hits hard for me come April. But it's good to see this. But also, I believe when they talk about these inspections of these diesel vehicles, it does happen. I've seen on a number of occasions where the police are randomly doing checks and they do get ticketed. And so there's been some complaints in regards to this for a lot of people who everyday lives, their livelihoods based on using these trucks and unable to afford, I guess, newer trucks that have better emissions. But nevertheless, this is where we're at right now because the air quality does get really, really bad. I'm going to move on to some economic news this time. The government will be reorganizing over 200 certification regulations from the ground up to reduce the burden on businesses. The Declaration of Conformity system will also be introduced to allow companies to certify and take responsibility for their proprietary technologies. Gee, let's get more on this.
Sure. So earlier today, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo discussed the certification regulation reform plan with details at a meeting of ministers related to national issues. Now, the government will first review the 257 statutory certification systems currently in operation and abolish 24 that are of low effectiveness. For example, in the case of natural and organic cosmetics, domestic certification will be abolished in favor of international certification. And in the field of natural cosmetics, the European Cosmos certification is already accepted internationally, and it has been pointed out that domestic certification is a double burden for companies. Now, certifications that have not been used since their introduction or have an unclear regulatory scope will also be abolished. And also 8 certification schemes with similar targets, test items, and procedures will all be consolidated. Now, the idea is to help companies get certified efficiently through the unified system without having to apply for each certification system separately. And for example, a company that designs energy-saving buildings will no longer need to obtain the so-called Zero Energy Building certification and the Building Energy Efficiency Rating certification separately, but will only need to obtain the integrated version of the certification. Now, the other 66 certification schemes will be improved by lowering the certification cost or even simplifying the process. And in particular, the Information Security Management System certification will significantly reduce the threshold for eligible companies from more than 10 billion Korean won in annual sales to more than 30 billion Korean won and introduce a simplified audit to shorten the certification period. Now, the government expects this to reduce the burden on businesses by some 152.7 billion won annually. However, most of these measures are stipulated in the law and must be passed by the National Assembly first. So the government plans to immediately work on improving 73 regulations that can be improved at the sub-enforcement level. And as you mentioned earlier, the Declaration of Conformity was also introduced by the government. This will allow companies to certify their own technologies and take responsibility for their safety. And this is a system that allows companies to certify themselves by checking the certification standards or having them confirmed by a specific testing organization. Now, the government has decided to maintain certification quality, however, through a thorough follow-up management after this is done by each of the companies. And this will allow private organizations to really enter the statutory certification market, which has usually been dominated by the government.
Let's move on here. Talk about an issue that has been going on for some quite time. And we've been covering this particular issue on several occasions. And focus on headline, we're talking about the U.S. nuclear power company Westinghouse. They're continuing its legal battle to prevent Korea hydro nuclear power from exporting its own nuclear reactors. If you remember, Westinghouse has been saying that KHNP has been using technology that belongs to Westinghouse. However, KHNP, of course, has gotten its own technology through the help of Westinghouse. Still, again, big issue here. This is also ongoing after Westinghouse lost its recent bid for a Czech nuclear plant. Yane, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. So Westinghouse was edged out of a Czech nuclear power plant bid. However, that hasn't stopped them from continuing this legal battle aimed at hindering KHNP's nuclear exports. Now, the heart of this dispute lies in whether this KHNP's nuclear technology intended for exports to countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, and Saudi Arabia is genuinely their original technology, or if it infringes on Westinghouse's technology. Now, as we've discussed a few times in our past stories, the main claim that Westinghouse is making is that KHNP must comply with the U.S. export control regulations, which requires business entities to give notification to the United States government or acquire permission from the U.S. government when exporting U.S. nuclear technology. However, the key of this matter is the originality of KHNP's nuclear technology, of course. So in the first trial, the court dismissed their claim on the grounds that export control enforcement is the prerogative of the U.S. government, not a private entity like Westinghouse. Nonetheless, Westinghouse has filed its appeal, arguing that while they acknowledge themselves as the entity which bears the responsibility of adhering to U.S. export controls, KHNP has failed to provide necessary information for U.S. government notification to Westinghouse, potentially implicating Westinghouse in legal troubles with the United States government. Now, both companies have been locked in this legal tussle in the U.S. courts, and simultaneously an international arbitration process is also underway in South Korea under the Korea Commercial Arbitration Board. While both the United States and South Korean governments hope for smooth nuclear cooperation between the two nations, the core of this issue of intellectual property rights between the companies and their significant differences is quite making this whole thing very challenging for governmental intervention.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been, you mentioned the orders put in place by countries like Poland, right, and Saudi Arabia. And it just seemed like Westinghouse is getting in the way. And I think there were discussions in the past where they were maybe trying to collaborate on this. And despite the fact that I think legally, I think there was people from the Korean side, Korea Hydro, which said that legally, I mean, you look at the documents here that clearly states that it's a original technology that stemmed from, because they did get help from Westinghouse initially, and they were able to derive the technology and create their own. But I believe they were talking about whether or not they were going to collaborate on the building of the nuclear plants in these countries instead. But I think that fell through too. We'll see what happens. I'm sure we'll be talking about this once again. Let's talk cryptocurrency here. Bitcoin. This is the biggest cryptocurrency by market cap, surging and surpassing the 55,000 mark for the first time in over 2 years. It's still going up strong right now as we speak. G, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. So the leading virtual currency in the market, Bitcoin, has crossed its highest point in more than 2 years and 3 months. Now, on the 26th, as per Coinbase, a US-based cryptocurrency exchange, the price of one Bitcoin was traded at $54,444, which is approximately 72.51 million won, which is an increase of 4.93% in a day. Now, Bitcoin has not crossed the $54,000 mark since December 2020 and has been hovering around the $51,000 mark for over 10 days since it initially touched $52,000 on the 14th of this month. However, Bitcoin surged around 5% from $51,200 during the day to $53,600 within 2 hours. and followed by a further increase from $53,500 to $54,900 in an hour after 3 hours. Now, since then, sales have been pouring in due to a short-term surge, and some of the gains have been returned without breaking through the 55,000 mark. Now, Ethereum, the second largest cryptocurrency by market cap, saw a 2.48% increase in its value, reaching $3,180. And according to an investment expert from GSR, a virtual currency investment company, Bitcoin is continuing to rise due to strong ETF inflows. Now, investors have put in over $5 billion into 9 ETFs since the Bitcoin ETF began trading last month. Now, the recent announcement by MicroStrategy, the largest holding company in Bitcoin, may have also contributed to the rise in Bitcoin's value, because the company revealed that it has purchased an additional 3,000 cryptocurrencies for $155.4 million this month, bringing its total Bitcoin holdings to around $10 billion.
Yeah, and currently I'm looking at the latest figures on the Bitcoin. A single Bitcoin right now at $56,443.20. So it is still surging, which also means that a lot of the other cryptocurrencies are surging as well. But again, I mean, this is an interesting one. There's a lot of people going from this is just a short-term thing, and then what usually happens is you get corrections, right? And it starts dipping down and people panic because they bought it at peak. But the whole idea of being able to purchase this as an ETF is a huge momentum for those that are more optimistic towards the cryptocurrency, and considering the fact that I believe there's only 21 million Bitcoins available to be mined. It's a limited amount. If you compare it to some of the other cryptocurrencies that are like trillions and billions in circulation, there is a limit to this. And so, again, I mean, there's always people saying, this is going to hit 100,000, 200,000. We're going to look at another bull run and stuff like that. But always tread carefully when you're, buying cryptocurrency and stuff. Let's move on here. South Korea's Defense Minister Shin Won-sik revealing that North Korea has supplied millions of artillery shells to Russia, which in turn has sent food aid to Pyongyang, contributing to stabilizing food prices in North Korea. Yane, let's get the latest on this.
So it was during the press conference held at the ministry's Yongsan office this morning that the minister, Shin Won-sik, presented there have been whopping 6,700 containers shipped from North Korea to Russia since July and August last year. Now, it's estimated that if the containers had contained 152 millimeter shells, the total number would have been over 3 million. If 122 millimeter rocket launcher shells were there, that would be over 5 million. Now, clearly, even though their factories were under-resourced and have operated at only around 30% capacity due to resource and electricity shortages, North Korea's military factories that produce munitions for Russia are still running at full scale. In return, Russia has been also sending back some containers to North Korea, with the count reaching around 9,000 since around last July. While the exact contents of these containers remain undisclosed, it is highly likely that food takes up a significant portion. And there are also indications that essential goods, materials, and parts are being sent to North Korea, some of which have potentially been used to manufacture products that are then exported back to Russia. Now, there was also talk about the exchange of military technology between the two nations. And the minister said Russia's commitment to provide North Korea with satellite technology seems to be continuing. And Pyongyang seems to be seeking Russian expertise in aviation and ground mobility equipment. The extent of technology transfer from Russia to North Korea could potentially increase depending on how reliant Russia becomes on North Korean ammunition. In response to such developments, South Korea, of course, is not just sitting on its hands. The country successfully launched its first military reconnaissance satellite last December and is preparing to launch a second one from a U.S. Air Force base in Florida in early April. Now, unlike the first satellite, which used optical and infrared sensors, the second one will employ synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, allowing for higher resolution imaging damaging under any weather conditions or time of the day. Also, to further bolster preparedness, South Korea plans to double the number of U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises during the first half of this year compared to last year.
So, I mean, there's always been speculation that there was some sort of transfer of military weapons to Russia by North Korea, except for the fact that the only evidence of this are different container ships going back and forth from like the Najin port to wherever port in Russia. But there's no X-ray vision. Like you can't see what's inside these containers. So there is no, I guess, tangible evidence that there is a transfer of these weapons other than the fact that they found some debris of ballistic missiles that seem to be from North Korea and things like that. But it's probably unlikely, according to many of the experts, that the transfer of the weapons led to the successful launching of their Arirang-1 reconnaissance satellite last year, because they said it was too short of a time. But what Shin Won-sik also, I believe, said was that very reconnaissance satellite that they launched last November, I believe it was, it's not really working. Like they launched, it's just floating in orbit. It doesn't have any function right now. And so they could be learning to get the technology from Russia. They are planning to send, I believe, 3 or 4 more soon. And so maybe by then they'll have a functioning reconnaissance satellite. But it is interesting. But we have to also note that if it's true that North Korea is sending millions of artillery shells, how this is going to certainly benefit Russia, because you have Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who said Monday that Ukraine has received less than a third. He said he received about 30% of ammunitions that was promised by the EU. You also had the U.S. encouraging South Korea to provide more support to boost Ukraine's defense capabilities against Russia. Gee, let's get the latest over there.
Sure. So in a joint press conference with Bulgarian Prime Minister Nikolai Denkov, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed that the European Union has only supplied 30% of the 1 million artillery shells they promised to Ukraine. Zelensky was responding to a journalist who had asked about the supply of shells, as some media outlets had reported that half of the shells had already arrived. Now, the president clarified that out of the 1 million shells that the EU had promised to Ukraine, only 30% had been delivered. Now, this came after EU member states pledged to increase the supply of artillery shells to Ukraine in March 2023 due to a shortage faced by troops on the front. Now, the EU countries agreed to jointly order the production of shells and supply ammunition from their stockpiles. However, according to Bloomberg, the EU was falling behind its plan to provide Ukraine with 1 million artillery shells by the previously set deadline of March the 1st, 2024, as by that time they would only have amassed approximately 30% of the planned amount. Meanwhile, Ukrainian intelligence reported that Russia plans to produce 2.7 million shells this year and already received 1.5 million shells from North Korea, but half of which malfunctioned. Additionally, a U.S. diplomat, Yuri Kim, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasian Affairs, expressed hope for South Korea to provide more defense material support to Ukraine and emphasized the need for continued aid to Ukrainian forces in their efforts to fend off Russian attacks.
Which shows you whatever amount North Korea is able to produce, right? They're really putting all their electricity, their limited electricity on those factories, full throttle to only produce these ammunitions, because some of these countries have come out, the countries within the EU that promised the artillery shells. They said, listen, I mean, we just don't have the capacity right now. We're also short of our own personal stockpile. I believe High Representative for EU's Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, also came out saying, look, I mean, yeah, it's delayed, but hopefully we'll be able to deliver 1 million by the end of March, I believe is what he said. And you're seeing, if you've been keeping up with what's going on with Ukraine right now, Russia is really pushing forward right now. The Ukrainians are just unable to defend some of these key cities and key areas, strategically important areas right now, because of the assistance that they're probably getting from North Korea. One last piece of story. This is certainly a big one. Sweden finally passing the last milestone in its journey to become a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, simply known as NATO. The Hungarian parliament given its green light, approving Sweden's bid to join the military alliance. Yane, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. So this long-awaited approval for Sweden marks the end of a significant waiting period for Sweden, which had applied for NATO membership 19 months ago, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, the ratification document approved by the parliament will soon be signed by Hungarian administrative branch and then sent over to the United States, which acts as the trustee country of the NATO treaty, a process which usually takes up to 5 days. Now, this move is particularly significant considering how Sweden used to remain in military neutrality for over 200 years alongside Finland. While Finland became the 31st member of the alliance last April, Sweden's journey faced some delays due to objections from Turkey and Hungary. Hungary's ratification talks remained stagnant even after Turkey decided to approve it. But on the 19th of this month, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban announced that he would vote on this bid when Parliament's spring session begins. And then 3 days before the vote, a Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson traveled to Budapest to meet with Orban and sign some deal to sell Swedish-made Gripen fighter jets. Now, as Finland and Sweden now joins the NATO family, Russia's border with NATO has now more than doubled, and NATO allies also encircles the strategically important Baltic Sea, home to Russia's second-largest city, St. Petersburg, with NATO allies.
All right, guys, as always, thank you very much for your reports. Have a safe one, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.